Today we're delving into a deeply unsettling case that began as an innocent living arrangement between two best friends, but ultimately spiraled into a harrowing tragedy. Tiara Mills and Camilla West had been nearly inseparable since high school, sharing everything from childhood secrets to adult dreams. When Tiara moved into Camilla's apartment, neither of them, or anyone around them, could have foreseen the grim fate that lay ahead. It all started in early August 2024. Tiara, 24, had recently walked away from a long-term relationship that left her needing a fresh start. Eager for a change, she packed up her belongings and settled into apartment 3C at the Sunrise Palms complex in Jacksonville's South Side. Camilla, 26, welcomed her friend with open arms, hoping that sharing a home would ease Tiara's transition and perhaps strengthen their already close bond. The two had always been more like sisters than friends. Social media showed them posing side by side in countless photos, hashtags of soulmates and sisters forever beneath bright smiles. It seemed like they had it all figured out, best friends chasing their dreams together. For Tiara, that dream was rooted in helping others. She was working hard to transfer to Florida and A&M University to study social work, a field she'd become passionate about while volunteering at a local shelter. Tiara's parents, Shonda and Darius Mills, had watched their daughter blossom into a kind, driven young woman. Shonda spent her days as a teacher at a nearby elementary school, while Darius kept the city streets clean as part of the maintenance crew. Their only child, Tiara, was their pride, a bright light in their lives who they knew was destined for something meaningful. Tiara saw her temporary stay at Camilla's apartment as a stepping stone. She planned to save up for her future while finishing her school applications. It was supposed to be a season of growth and newfound freedom. But within a matter of weeks, her dreams were overshadowed by a darkness no one saw coming. Tiara's sudden disappearance began as a ripple of concern among friends and family. At first, her missed texts and skipped work shifts seemed like the result of a roommate disagreement, maybe a spat that left Tiara wanting space. But as the days stretched into weeks, those ripples became tidal waves of dread. Tiara's phone remained silent, and her online presence vanished. When detectives were finally called in, what they found inside apartment 3C shattered any illusions that this was a simple roommate dispute. Instead, they uncovered a twisted tale of obsession and control that no one could have predicted. The apartment itself, once a cozy haven for two friends, had become a silent witness to something far more sinister. Investigators noted the eerie stillness, the absence of Tiara's belongings, and the chilling silence that seemed to hang over the place like a shroud. It didn't take long for them to piece together that this was no mere falling out between roommates. It was something much darker. Camilla, who had always seemed like the supportive friend, became the focus of intense scrutiny. Friends and family were left reeling as the truth slowly emerged. Tiara, with her gentle nature and bright spirit, had been caught in a web of control that tightened until there was no way out. It's hard to imagine how quickly things unraveled. From the outside, it looked like a typical story of two friends sharing a home and chasing their goals. But behind closed doors, a dangerous dynamic had taken hold, one marked by jealousy, manipulation, and ultimately, violence. Today we remember Tiara not just as a victim of a terrible crime, but as a young woman who had so much life ahead of her. Her dreams of making a difference, of opening her own nonprofit to uplift others, were cut short far too soon. And her family, her friends, and her community continue to grapple with the loss of someone who was always ready to help others before herself. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We want to hear your thoughts on this tragic case. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. In sharing these stories, we hope to honor the lives that were lost and shine a light on the dangers that can lurk behind the most unsuspecting of doors. Shonda remembered helping her daughter pack before she left. She hugged Tiara tight outside the apartment complex, gave her some last-minute motherly advice, and watched as Tiara disappeared up the breezeway steps. For the next few weeks, everything seemed perfectly fine. Tiara kept in touch with daily text messages, video calls to her parents every night, and continued working at a youth counseling center nearby. But on August 23rd, Shonda realized something was off. She hadn't heard from Tiara since the previous morning, and her calls were going straight to voicemail. At first, she chalked it up to Tiara being busy or maybe feeling overwhelmed. But as the next afternoon came, her unease turned to alarm. So on August 25th, Shonda and Darius went to Sunrise Palms themselves. When they arrived, Camilla West answered the door. She looked nervous, her hair unkempt and clothes wrinkled. Shonda later told investigators that Camilla said Tiara had left the apartment 2 nights before to meet someone she'd recently started chatting with online. According to Camilla, Tiara had hurriedly packed a small bag, said she needed some space, and then vanished. Camilla insisted she hadn't seen or heard from Tiara since then. But to Shonda, the explanation felt hollow. Tiara had never gone anywhere without telling her family. Plus, her phone was turned off, which wasn't like her at all. Tiara's job confirmed she hadn't shown up for work, and a cousin shared that Tiara had sent them a cryptic message a few days prior. Something doesn't feel right here anymore.
Then, on August 28th, a neighbor who lived right above apartment 3C contacted the building manager. They complained about a strong, foul smell that had been coming from the balcony below for several days. Management notified the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and that evening, officers knocked on Camilla West's door. On the apartment's balcony, hidden between patio chairs and pool floats, they found a large plastic storage bin wrapped in layer upon layer of duct tape. When they finally opened it, the source of the smell was unmistakable. Inside was a human body, partly covered with a blanket and already in an advanced state of decomposition. Officers saw clear signs of trauma on the body, bruises around the wrists, and dark discoloration along the face and neck. Camilla was inside the apartment when they made the discovery, and she was immediately taken in for questioning. She wept and told them repeatedly, "I didn't do anything. I didn't put her there." The body was removed and sent to the Duval County Medical Examiner's office. Dental records and tattoos confirmed what everyone feared. It was Tiara Mills. The autopsy revealed the cause of death was strangulation. Tiara's hyoid bone was fractured, deep ligature marks encircled her neck, and her lips were darkened from lack of oxygen. Her wrists showed extensive bruising, suggesting she'd been restrained. Defensive wounds on her arms and knees told a clear story. Tiara had fought back. The coroner determined she had died on the night of August 22nd, which lined up with the last time anyone had heard from her. When police spoke to Camilla West, her stories kept changing. First, she claimed Tiara had left on her own to meet someone she'd met online. Later, she said Tiara had been drinking heavily and passed out. Finally, in a third version, she said they'd argued and she woke up to find Tiara gone. She never once mentioned anything about violence or an accident. But the physical evidence spoke louder than her words. Toxicology tests showed no alcohol or sedatives in Tiara's system, ruling out the idea that she died peacefully in her sleep. There was no gentle slipping away. Tiara had been killed. The news reached Tiara's family in the early hours of August 29th. When the official word came, those in the Mills household said Shonda collapsed on the spot, the weight of those words shattering her world. Darius Mills managed to catch her before she hit the porch floor, a moment that haunted him in the days that followed. Tiara's family had been calling her phone each morning, clinging to the possibility that she might respond. That flicker of hope was finally extinguished when authorities confirmed the body's identity. In Tiara's childhood bedroom, investigators found shelves lined with sociology books and stacks of handwritten journals. Those journals revealed her dreams of transferring to Florida A&M University, an application she'd nearly completed, dated just 3 days before her death, August 19th, sat in her backpack, signed and ready to mail. Crime scene technicians returned to the apartment determined to leave no detail unexamined. On the balcony, faint smudges of fingerprints peeked out from beneath the trash bin. Some of those prints belonged to Camilla West. Inside the living room, investigators pried open a cracked laundry basket and found a pillowcase stained with blood. In the bathroom, under the sink, they discovered latex gloves and a bottle of concentrated bleach. What had initially seemed like an overly tidy apartment was now viewed as a meticulously staged scene. Investigators noticed that cleaning supplies usually stored in a cabinet were missing. Surfaces that should have held dust or streaks were freshly scrubbed. When they looked at Camilla's phone, the search history painted a chilling picture. How to report a missing person, body in storage, how long before a body smells, and will smell go away with vinegar. These searches suggested not just a cleanup, but an effort to cover up decomposition entirely. Camilla never called emergency services on the night of August 22nd. She didn't send a single message to any friend or family member about Tiara's condition. Her phone remained active throughout the night and into the early morning hours, yet none of that activity reflected concern for Tiara. At this point, the case was officially classified as a homicide. Camilla West was taken into custody, charged with concealment of a human body, and held without bond while detectives gathered more evidence. Although a murder charge hadn't been formally filed yet, everything investigators uncovered contradicted Camilla's stories. The autopsy conducted by the Duval County medical examiner only deepened suspicions. Tiara hadn't slipped away quietly in her sleep. Her body was marked with signs of a brutal struggle. Defensive wounds covered her forearms, scratches, bruises, and deep contusions that showed she fought back. Her ribs were fractured from blunt force trauma, and her knees were scraped as if she'd been shoved or pinned down. The most damning evidence lay in the ligature marks around her neck and a fractured hyoid bone, all indicating that she was strangled during a violent confrontation. Underneath Tiara's nails, forensic technicians found trace DNA that matched Camilla's skin cells, likely left behind during the desperate struggle. When investigators asked Camilla about the fresh scratches on her own forearms, she gave vague answers. At first, she claimed she couldn't remember how she got them. Later, she said she'd been working outside and handling rough boxes. Not once did she admit to any altercation with Tiara. Her story shifted each time she was questioned. In some versions, she claimed Tiara stormed out after an argument. In others, she said she woke up to find the apartment empty. But the narrative she clung to the most, Tiara leaving to meet someone, wasn't supported by any of the evidence investigators were gathering. Detectives had already decided her stories didn't hold water. To widen their investigation, authorities secured a warrant to access Tiara's iCloud account, which she had used to store personal data and thoughts. Among those digital files, they found voice memos she had recorded in the weeks before her death. One in particular, dated August 17th, stopped them in their tracks.
In a soft, unsteady voice, Tiara spoke directly to anyone who might hear her later. "She's starting to watch everything I do," Tiara said. "If something happens to me, please look here." The file was time-stamped and untouched. Investigators also found screenshots of text messages she had sent to friends, describing how Camilla's behavior was becoming increasingly possessive and controlling. One message to an old classmate summed up Tiara's growing fear. "She acts like she owns my time. I'm starting to feel boxed in." Just 3 days before she died, Tiara sent a message that read, "She wants me to only need her. It's not healthy." This message, along with others, painted a picture of a relationship teetering on the edge. Tiara's words revealed the controlling and manipulative nature of her connection with Camilla. Investigators took these digital records seriously, adding them to the growing body of evidence they were compiling. Neighbors in the Sunrise Palms complex were also interviewed. One woman, living next door in Unit 3E, told detectives she heard a loud argument the night Tiara disappeared. There was a lot of yelling and then crying, then it just stopped, all at once. She hadn't called the police at the time, thinking it was just a fight that had ended on its own. As detectives pieced together the scene, They combined what they'd found in Tiara's phone with what they had from witness statements, the autopsy, and the crime scene itself. Together, it told a harrowing story. They brought this information to the state attorney's office. On September 2, 2024, they charged Camila West with second-degree murder, hiding a body, and obstructing the investigation. Her request for bail was denied. Camila, through her public defender, entered a not guilty plea. She claimed Tiara's death was a tragic accident. The Mills family didn't say much publicly. They held a quiet funeral service on September 6, 2024, surrounded by family, old classmates, co-workers, and members of Tiara's church. Tiara's parents, Shonda and Darius, walked behind the casket in silence. A childhood photo of Tiara, smiling and wearing her school uniform, sat on top of the closed casket. A police escort led the way from the funeral home to Evergreen Cemetery, where she was laid to rest. Victim advocates from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office were there, helping the family with both practical and emotional needs. They also assisted Tiara's parents in writing a victim impact statement for the upcoming trial. Meanwhile, prosecutors worked behind the scenes, creating a detailed timeline that would show the progression of events. The case was built on a solid foundation, a clear motive rooted in a toxic dynamic, a pattern of violence, and deliberate efforts to hide the truth. What prosecutors had to prove was whether Camila West had acted with intent, whether this was a calculated act or a situation that spiraled out of control. By the middle of September 2024, the prosecution had zeroed in on the crucial hours of Tiara's last night. They used phone data and other digital evidence to create a detailed picture of what happened. A dark towel was draped over the bin as it was wheeled down the walkway, concealing its contents. There was no sign of Tiara leaving the apartment that night, or ever again. Investigators believe this was Camila's attempt to move or hide the body, though why she ultimately brought it back to the balcony remains a mystery. Maybe she couldn't find another place to dispose of it, or had second thoughts. Either way, the video footage, along with Camila's internet searches, suggested a clear awareness of what had happened and a concerted effort to deal with it. Financial transactions became another piece of the puzzle. On August 23rd, Camila took out $600 in cash from a shared vacation account that she and Tiara had opened the year before. They'd been saving for a getaway to New Orleans, and Tiara had still been adding money to the fund as recently as July. But there was no trip in the works, and the cash went unused. When questioned about it, Camila gave no explanation. Detectives also noticed that Camila's social media presence shifted dramatically after Tiara's disappearance. She deleted almost every photo that included Tiara, except for one post to her Instagram story on August 26th. It was an older picture of Tiara, heavily filtered and captioned, "Always watching over me." Authorities saw this as an attempt to control how others viewed her or perhaps to distract from suspicion. It was an eerie message, posted before Tiara's death was publicly known. Psychological assessments ordered by the court offered more insight into Camila's mindset. A forensic psychologist concluded she showed patterns typical of dependent personality disorder and a kind of pathological attachment. The report noted that Camila was so emotionally tied to Tiara that she couldn't function without her. Friends of both women told detectives that Camila would get upset if Tiara spent time with other people. One former co-worker said Camila was jealous and possessive, quick to see others as a threat. Another remembered her saying, "She's all I've got." Camila stayed behind bars at Duval County Jail, denied bound. After her arrest, Camila wrote a series of letters from her cell, but correctional staff intercepted them before they could leave the facility. These letters didn't name a recipient, but were filled with thoughts that prosecutors later described as unstable and obsessive. In one, she wrote, "She was slipping away from me. I couldn't let her abandon me like everyone else did." Prosecutors believed these letters showed how her fear of losing Tiara and her obsessive need for control had driven her actions. The trial began on December 2, 2024, at the Duval County Circuit Court. Interest was high, with reporters and locals following the story closely. It was one of the most disturbing and emotionally fraught cases the city had seen in years. Assistant State Attorney Michelle Darrow laid out the timeline for the jury, showing how Tiara was pulling away, trying to get out from under Camila's grip. She was reconnecting with old friends, making plans for her future, and applying to school, building a life of her own. According to the state, Camila couldn't handle this shift. The fear of being left behind turned into something darker, culminating in violence. The prosecution focused on the night of August 22nd. Forensic pathologists testified that Tiara's death wasn't sudden or accidental. The injuries pointed to a sustained assault. This wasn't a brief moment of anger, one medical examiner explained. It took sustained force and intention to cause these injuries. It was clear, they said, that this wasn't a quick or impulsive act. It was a drawn-out assault that ended Tiara's life.
To bolster their argument, digital experts showed Camila's online history to the court. Chilling search queries like, "How to hide a dead body," and "Can vinegar cover the smell of decay?" These searches happened after Tiara had already died. Prosecutors said this was not the behavior of someone panicking or acting out of fear. It was cold and methodical. Together, these details painted a grim portrait. In the final hours of Tiara's life, she had been trying to break free from a relationship that was controlling and suffocating. Camila, unable to face life without her, chose to take it from her entirely. The evidence showed a desperate, possessive love twisted into something lethal, and the lengths Camila would go to cover it up. The evidence painted a troubling picture: clear awareness, deliberate planning, and an effort to hide what had been done. To help the jury understand Camila's mindset, the court brought in behavioral experts. One of them, Dr. Lena Wallace, described Camila's profile in court. She said Camila displayed signs of pathological attachment, an intense and unhealthy bond that blurred her own identity with Tiara's. Dr. Wallace explained that Camila relied on Tiara for her sense of self. The fear of being rejected was overwhelming. She saw it as a threat to her entire existence. This analysis was supported by letters Camila had written while in jail. The prosecution read some of these in court. One haunting line read, "She kept slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it." On the fourth day of the trial, Tiara's parents, Shanda and Darius Mills, took the witness stand. Shanda's words shook the courtroom. Through tears and pauses, she spoke of her daughter. "She was a good girl. She never caused trouble. I begged her not to stay there. I told her something felt wrong. I should have come and taken her back." Her voice cracked several times, and the silence in the room was heavy. Darius spoke only once, turning to face Camila directly. "She was our only child, and now she's gone." The defense tried to offer a different perspective. Led by public defender Julian Rowe, they argued that Camila had suffered a dissociative episode, triggered by past trauma and emotional turmoil. They said she didn't understand what she was doing and blocked out the memory as a way to protect herself. She was lost in her own confusion, Rowe told the jury. She wasn't calculating, she was overwhelmed. But when the prosecution cross-examined the defense's witnesses, they picked apart this idea. They focused on the facts: Camila's internet searches, the physical cleanup, and how she tried to hide Tiara's body on the balcony. These, they argued, were not signs of panic or dissociation. This was deliberate, said Assistant State Attorney Michelle Darrow. She knew Tiara was gone. She knew she had to cover it up, and she took steps to do exactly that. Camila did not testify in her own defense. Her lawyers advised her not to, worried that her fragile state of mind and the pressure of questioning could harm their argument more than help it. In their final statements to the jury, the prosecution returned to Tiara's own voice, her final message to the world. They played a recording that Tiara had saved on her iCloud account, captured on August 17th. It lasted less than 30 seconds. Her voice was low, cracking with fear.
She's starting to watch everything I do. If something happens to me, please look here." The courtroom was absolutely still as her words played out. Several jurors wiped away tears. With that, the prosecution rested its case. On December 11, 2024, the jury returned its verdict in the case of the state of Florida versus Camila West. Guilty on all counts. Camila was convicted of second-degree murder and of hiding Tiara's remains. There was no reaction from Camila as the verdict was read. The courtroom stayed hushed. Her defense team did not file an immediate appeal, though they reserved the right to do so later. 2 weeks after the verdict, sentencing took place. Judge Helena Griffin spoke firmly from the bench. She told the court this was a tragedy rooted in possessiveness and control. "This was a preventable tragedy," she said. "You took a life that trusted you, and the family will never get her back." Camila was sentenced to 37 years in the Florida Department of Corrections. Under the law, she would have to serve at least 30 years before being considered for parole. Because she had no previous criminal record and had undergone mental health evaluations, she was assigned to a medium security facility in the northern part of the state. Her intake record marked her as non-suicidal, but noted that she was at risk of isolation. As the final chapter of the case closed, the Mills family faced the painful truth of their loss and the stark reminder of what can happen when love twists into control and becomes something fatal. After the trial came to a close, Shanda and Darius Mills stepped out of the courthouse one last time. A small group of family members and victim advocates stood by their side. They quietly released a single white balloon into the cloudy Jacksonville sky. Local news outlets captured the moment, but there was no public statement. They simply turned and went home. Tiara's bedroom at the Mills home was left just as she had known it. Her books stayed in their place, her school planner still open to the week she died. The application she had carefully filled out for Florida A&M but never signed was placed in a memory box by her parents. They shared only that they intended to keep the room exactly how she left it, a quiet tribute to her daughter's memory. Meanwhile, at the Sunrise Palms apartment complex, Unit 3C sat empty. Management confirmed they had stopped showing the unit to new tenants. While no state law in Florida prevents a property from being re-rented after a crime, no one had signed a new lease by the time the trial ended. Residents on the third floor continued to feel uneasy about what had happened there. Some decided to move out, hoping to leave behind the weight of what had occurred. The closet balcony where Tiara's body had been found was sealed off and renovated. But one final detail, not revealed until after the trial, emerged during a thorough review of the crime scene in late September. During a last check of apartment 3C, technicians removed a loose ventilation panel in the hallway closet. Taped behind it was a single sheet of lined paper, folded carefully and pressed flat. It was written in Tiara's own hand. Though the note was undated, investigators believed it was penned in early August, around 2 weeks before she died. It didn't name anyone or spell out any accusations. It simply read, "This place doesn't feel like home anymore. I'm trying to find my way back." Investigators described the note as a quiet cry for help, a reflection of the unease and desperation she must have felt.
The original note was returned to her parents, while a copy was placed into the official case file. It became another small but telling piece of the tragic puzzle. Tiara's final words preserved for those who wanted to remember her, not just for how she died, but for how she tried to find her way out. With the sentencing finished and no appeals filed by the defense as of early 2025, the state of Florida formally closed the case. No other suspects were ever identified, and no additional charges were filed beyond those already brought against Camila West. All physical evidence, every last piece collected by the crime scene team, was documented and stored in the police archives. The case remains inactive, with no further action planned. In the end, the trial and the evidence told a story of how a bond, twisted by dependency and control, could turn fatal. Tiara's parents and loved ones are left to carry on, honoring her memory in the quiet of her old room and the soft echoes of her dreams for the future. At the Sunrise Palms complex, the apartment stands as a stark reminder of the loss that was felt not just by a family, but by an entire community. As the chapter closed, the weight of what had been lost lingered in the air. The white balloon that Shonda and Darius released outside the courthouse drifted into the sky, a symbol of letting go and remembering, of the pain and love that remain even when the world moves on.